was an experiment and we were very satisfied कि अगले दिन सब कुछ smooth हुआ. तो वो trial था. पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट को ठीक करने में 1-1.5 साल लगेगा. तब तक हम सोच रहे हैं कि हर महीने अगर 15-15 दिन करें तो भी पोल्यूशन में भी थोड़ी कमी आएगी और कंजेशन से काफी रिलीफ मिलेगा.
The AAP-led Delhi government has issued a notification on the fortnight-long odd-even car rationing scheme that comes into force from the 15th of April. The Kejriwal government has decided to exempt women and cars carrying school children in uniform in the second round of the road rationing plan. The violation of the scheme will attract a fine of 2,000 rupees. To give relief to daily commuters, the Delhi Metro will add more than 3,000 trips per day and 30 coaches as well. But how effective will this be? We're now joined by Sunita Narayan, the Director General of the Centre for Science and Environment. Also joining us, Roshan Shankar, advisor to the Delhi government, and Harish Salve joins us on the phone line. Appreciate you joining us. Mr. Roshan Shankar, let me start by asking you, because we want clarification on two counts. One, is this something that now the Delhi government is going to do every month? Because that seems to be the indication that the Chief Minister has given out. So on the 30th of April, can we then expect a return of the odd even on the 15th of May?
Shireen, thanks for that question. So I think the two big takeaways from Odd Even 1, which was one of the most successful policy experiments that has been conducted at a large scale, was that one, that people saw several benefits from it, and this includes congestion, but also the savings that come from lesser traffic on ground. This includes fuel savings to less road traffic, which led to better outcomes at public hospitals. But I think the government is still seeing the implications of what the effect on air quality is, as well as how we can bolster it while taking up the amount of public infrastructure and transport in the city. So I think even this time we are going to do a much more aggressive study with over 200 sites being studied for pollution, 74 mobile air monitoring stations, as well as 3 new ambient monitoring stations that we've had included in this year's budget. So I think more data, more ways in which we can justify this sort of experiment in the country, because it does sort of take away the right of people to drive on those days. But I think the citizens of Delhi have really supported the Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal's experiment that has gotten a lot of benefits.
You keep, Roshan Shankar, you keep calling it an experiment. The Chief Minister keeps calling it an experiment as well. But let's try and see whether this experiment has been successful or not. And there are different reports that that can be used by your government to prop up this experiment, and there are reports that seem to suggest that the experiment wasn't in fact successful. Sunita Narayan, let me put that question to you, because if I were to look at the Delhi IIT study, it says that the odd even was of little use, the car use reduced by 35%, not the claimed 50%. Benefits of the program on the daytime air quality were limited. Decrease in car emissions were offset by the increase in the flow of traffic. So there are several findings that the IIT Delhi survey has put out which claim that the experiment was not really successful. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Shireen, those findings have been contradicted by another study by CRRI. So, I mean, we can get into the numbers, but let me say what, you know, we are a proponent of odd and even scheme, but we have proposed it as an emergency action. Odd and even scheme cannot be used as a proxy for inaction on some of the very big things we need to do to restrain the use of cars and to make sure that we can combat air pollution. And that means augmenting public transport.
So I'm glad you mentioned that point. So Sunita, so let me ask you a pointed question. Do you believe that it has now become a proxy? It's being used like a band-aid, slap it on, you know, pull it off as and when required? Because as you said, you did propose it as an emergency measure. Has it now become a proxy for not really backing up or following through on some of the other urgent interventions?
Yeah. See, Shireen, I'm not willing to go that far yet because it's only been 3 months, but I definitely think the government of Delhi needs to bring in public transport and augment it fast. It cannot say that that will happen over 2 years. That's not good enough. The last government actually brought in 1,500 vehicles in a year. So you need to be able to ramp up the action. You need to be able to do what is needed for long-term gains to reduce the cars on the road. The big advantage of odd and even is that it actually is a great congestion measure. And let's also be clear that in January, when odd and even came in, CSC did an analysis of 15 days, and we are very clear, it did combat pollution by making sure that the peaks of pollution were not as high as they would have been. And that's a big thing to do when you need emergency action. But you need to make sure that odd and even is complemented, or actually you don't need odd and even because you have long-term action which kicks in.
Okay, Roshan Shankar, respond to the comments made there by Sunita Narayan, and then I'll bring Harish Salve into this conversation as well, because that seems to be the feeling. We just heard that soundbite of the Chief Minister there saying that in terms of public infrastructure, we will probably start to see a change or a difference a year and a half down the line. So it inconveniences the citizens of Delhi. What is holding you back in just trying to get more buses, for instance, on the road? What's holding you back?
Sure, I'll respond to two parts of that question. I think we've dug deep into our kitty of policies that we can implement in Delhi, and fortunately or unfortunately, odd even is the one that captures the attention of the media. There are several other measures which include a ban on waste burning, as well as implementation of that ban through our SDM offices, the closure of plants in Bhavana and Badarpur, which are thermal power plants, which bring in a lot of pollution, PM 2.5 and PM 10 in Delhi, as well as a slew of different measures. On the day the odd even one was notified, there were 12 other notifications that went out that bolster the environmental aspect on how clean Delhi should be. That being said, there is public participation from odd even, which is why you see a lot of the conversation in the media and the communication from the government on that. But we are doing a lot. So, for example, we've in this year's budget, we'll be procuring 1,000 new buses, both cluster buses as well as low-tier AC buses across the city, 500 more AC buses in routes that were not existent before. So I think along with the expansion of the Delhi Metro, new buses being procured on Delhi streets today, once we reach a place where we have enough public infrastructure of transport on the streets, where people have the opportunity to use another mode of transport, that's when we can even think about making this regular, or we can think about making such an experiment permanent. I think odd even is the representation, it's the symbol of what the Delhi government's commitment to air pollution and trying to finish that is. But there are a slew of different policy measures which both the Minister of PWD, such as vacuum cleaning of roads, because
fair point. We did report
is one of the biggest components of our air pollution. Along with that, just one last point,
and
including, and this is...
Go ahead.
Sunita gave us a suggestion. The government is doing many at-scale source apportionment studies which will contribute to our understanding of pollution itself. All these reports that you cited are pilot studies or studies of very small areas in Delhi, as opposed to doing a citywide study of what causes our pollution, which is something that the Delhi government will do.
All right. Yes, we have reported extensively on the budgetary allocations that you've made, especially as far as the transportation sector is concerned this time around. But let me bring in Harish Salve. Mr. Salve, do you believe that it's a good idea to continue this experiment with odd and even? And what would you propose now in terms of putting those long-term solutions in place? Of course, the diesel ban on vehicles with engine capacity of more than 2,000 cc continues to be sub judice. It's a matter that the court is still grappling with. Whether we'll see another environment tax being slapped onto those vehicles before they start to fly in Delhi is a question before the court. But what is your comment on this new experiment, or more experiment that we're going to start now with the odd and even again? And what would you propose now in terms of long-term solutions?
The first long-term solution I have is a climate change for the media. Please stop asking why you're doing something and start asking why you're not doing other things. The debate next time should be, why have you not increased buses? Why have you...
I just asked that question, sir.
Correct. If they are doing something, excellent. Let them try. We need all of the above. It is not that whether you want diesel versus whether you want odd and even, whether you want odd and even versus whether you want more buses, whether you want more buses versus you want to stop burning waste. We have destroyed our climate. We have destroyed our environment. We need to do everything. Second very important thing. I am not on how successful or unsuccessful odd and even is. Sunita has made a very valid point that these are like emergency measures, but there's something larger going on here. We need to convince people of this world and people of this country climate change will require suffering and sacrifice from each one of us.
Right.
And let's get mentally reconciled to that. Whether odd and even, whether not using cars, whether walking to work, whether cycling, whether living without fossil fuel, whatever it does, if it requires
Mr.
sacrifice,
Salve, hi, this
so
is
be it.
Nayantara. Mr. Salve, this is Nayantara. I had one quick question for you. You're the amicus curiae, and in the Supreme Court, you've also raised a question and made a case for why trucks entering Delhi should not be paying more, why they should be entering Delhi and not bypassing Delhi. I'm sure when you drive around, you're horrified at the number of trucks that we see, even at hours that they're not supposed to be. Are you planning to take this up at the Supreme Court?
See, absolutely. But let's also, Nantara, let's also realize we have a real problem. You cannot expect a creaky enforcement system to suddenly become cracking and efficient when it comes to regulating traffic when they can't regulate other violations. So we have a compromised enforcement system across the board. The real solution, and according to me, that's where the governments, and I'm not saying state, governments have let this country down. It was Chief Justice Kirpal, who retired maybe a decade ago, who had directed the two bypasses of Delhi. We were last week in court where they were still wrangling about whether the new concessionaire of the Western Highway will do something or not doing something. The government is patting itself on the back because half the highway is ready. What's going to happen to the traffic midway through? So, this is where you people, please, in the media, focus. There are such huge lapses. Let me tell you about air pollution caused by electricity. Why is the Bhavana plant not running? Because they divert gas, cheap gas, to fertilizers. Why? Because government hides subsidy to fertilizers. So they don't want to give it to the Bhavana power plant. Is that not an issue we should be focusing upon? Why don't call somebody from the union government and ask him to answer what is more important, lives of people of Delhi or cheating the fiscal deficit by giving disguised subsidies?
That's a question that the Finance Ministry and the Finance Minister will have to answer, Mr. Salve, but you're absolutely right. As Sunita and yourself have been pointing out, there are several issues that require follow-through action, and there are several issues that we continue to want to debate here. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but sacrifices will need to be made, not just by governments, but by citizens as well. And, people can call it symbolism, but if it gets people to talk about the issue, which is a burning issue of climate change and pollution, well, so be it. Our experiment with the odd and even for the second time around in the national capital will start on the 15th of April. Roshan Shankar, Sunita Narayan and Harish Salve, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. With that, it is time